torture, entertainment. When you think of Rome, your mind goes straight to white marble and deep philosophy. You picture emperors debating honor in sunlit gardens. What you never picture is the horror waiting for those Rome defeated. Not during battle. After. When the killing stopped, the spectacle started, and the conquered were still alive to suffer through every second of it. That is where Rome drops the mask. And underneath, there is nothing noble. Only savagery dressed in ceremony. Because Roman victory was just the opening act. The nightmare came next. Queens who once commanded empires were paraded through screaming streets like exotic animals. Warlords who led armies of 50,000 men spent their final breaths rotting in underground dungeons beneath holy temples. The virgin daughters of kings were tossed to legionnaires like spoils of war, their fates sealed by Roman law and Roman applause. The same empire that invented sophisticated courts and preached stoic discipline also engineered public degradation so extreme that their own chroniclers flinched when recording it. This is that story. We walk alongside Queen Zenobia as she stumbles through Rome wrapped in golden chains meant to mock her power. We stand with Boudica as Roman whips tear into her flesh, while her own tribe watches in horror. We descend into the Tullianum with Vercingetorix as daylight disappears and the crowd above roars for his death. This is not the sanitized version from your history class. This is what they bury beneath words like conquest and civilization. Before we witness the darkest hours these rulers ever faced, drop a comment with your city and country. Because once you see what Rome truly was, you will never see it the same way again. The battlefield outside Antioch is dead quiet. No more screaming, no more clashing steel. Just Roman soldiers walking through corpses, sorting the breathing from the gone. Queen Zenobia's army is shattered. Her commanders already know what defeat usually means. You fight, you lose, you die with some shred of dignity. But Rome never followed that script. Rome had other plans for the living. Dead enemies send one message. Broken survivors send that message for generations. Here is what your teachers never mentioned. The moment that battle ended, Zenobia stopped being a person in Roman eyes. Their lawyers had a clean little phrase for it. Ius gentium, the law of nations. Sounds civilized, sounds reasonable. In reality, it meant this: if you are not Roman and you lose to Rome, you become property. Your throne means nothing. Your victories mean nothing. Your bloodline means nothing. Roman law for defeated foreigners was brutally simple. You are whatever the winner says you are. Roman citizens, even the poorest ones, had protections. They could not be publicly flogged without legal proceedings. They could not be executed without a formal sentence. They had rights, at least technically. Foreign prisoners had zero. The oldest Roman laws, the 12 tables from centuries before, had already made this clear. Captives belong to the state or to whoever captured them. You can be sold, traded, used. There is no court that will hear your case, no judge who cares about your story. The law already decided. You lost. The contrast is savage. A Roman citizen standing before a magistrate is a human being under the law. A captured queen standing before a Roman general is an asset. That is all. Yesterday she commanded legions. Today she is inventory, ranked alongside shields, coins, horses, and slaves on a logistics sheet. The only question anyone asks is not what is just. The only question is how useful is she breathing. If you were a man, your future was limited and ugly. You could be sold into brutal labor. You could be thrown into the mines. You could be dumped into an arena to bleed for entertainment. A few wealthy nobles might be ransomed if their families had enough gold. If not, you became a long-term prisoner or disposable spectacle. Rome had perfected a system for turning defeated warriors into profit and public amusement. If you were a woman, especially royalty, things got worse. Roman military culture treated captured women as rewards. Some aristocratic prisoners were kept in supervised houses and handled with surface politeness, while deals were negotiated. But polite never meant safe. And that was the lucky minority. For most women, the line between prisoner of war and slave existed only on paper. In real life, that line did not exist. Female captives faced forced labor, forced sex, forced marriages, forced transformation into household property. A royal gown could be replaced by a slave collar in a single moment. One day you are the daughter of a king. The next day you are handed from one officer to another like a piece of furniture. No documents, no discussion. Just a decision made by men who know no law will ever challenge them. The empire had nothing in its legal framework that protected the dignity of conquered women. They were not citizens. They were loot. But Rome understood something beyond raw violence. Rome understood theater. Rome understood terror. Rome understood that if you want to dominate the world, you do not just win wars. You show everyone what happens to those who dared resist. You transform their defeat into a public event. That is where the triumph enters the story. The triumph was not just a parade. It was state-sponsored humiliation. It was a day-long ritual of absolute dominance. Only a handful of generals ever received a triumph. You needed a massive victory, enormous enemy casualties, and new territory absorbed into Rome. Then the Senate voted. If they approved, the city prepared. The route through Rome stretched for miles. From the Field of Mars, through packed streets, through the Forum, up to the Capitoline Hill. Merchants closed their shops. Families abandoned their homes. People crushed into every available space just to witness it. At the front of the procession came noise and color. Trumpets, drums, performers to keep the mob excited. Behind them, carts overflowing with captured treasure. Gold, silver, weapons, shields, statues ripped from foreign temples. Then came paintings and models of destroyed cities, so Romans could see what their legions had annihilated in lands they would never visit. Exotic animals from conquered territories dragged along in chains. Every element screamed the same sentence. We took all of this, and no one could stop us. And then came the humans. The prisoners. This is the part of the line where you do not want to be. Captured kings, queens, princes, generals, their children. Some were dressed in rags. Others were kept in their royal clothing deliberately. Rome wanted the contrast. They wanted the crowd to see crowns and chains in the same image. The higher your former status, the more entertainment value your collapse provided. Soldiers marched in polished armor, while the defeated stumbled ahead, wrists bound, ankles shackled, watched by thousands of hungry Roman eyes. Roman historians like Tacitus did not soften this. He wrote about conquered British leaders paraded and humiliated without hesitation. Roman officials never said, "This is excessive." They said, "This is effective." Crushing the pride of royalty in full public view was not a side effect. It was the entire point. It told every ally and every enemy, if you fight Rome and lose, this is your destiny. You will not disappear quietly. You will be mocked, and discarded when the show ends. For royal women, the humiliation cut deeper. Their bodies became part of the message. As they walked the endless route, crowds stared, shouted, laughed, pointed. No one was coming to save them. There were no curtains to hide behind. The march lasted hours. The route was deliberately slow so every district of the city could enjoy the view. For a captive queen, every single step was a reminder. You are no longer a ruler. You are content. Now bring Zenobia back into focus. She was not some minor figure. She was not a token client queen. She led Palmyra, a city that controlled trade routes between the Roman world and the East. After Rome's crisis in the 3rd century, when emperors were rising and falling within months, Zenobia saw opportunity. She moved fast. She pushed her territory into Egypt and across Syria. She ruled lands that had been Roman provinces. Rome noticed. Rome was already hemorrhaging from internal chaos and external threats. Having an Eastern queen acting like a peer power was unacceptable. Emperor Aurelian was not a philosopher. He was a professional eliminator of problems. He rebuilt Roman authority with ruthless efficiency. When he turned his attention to Zenobia, he did not send diplomatic messages. He sent legions. Campaign after campaign hammered Palmyrene control. City after city was dragged back under Roman authority. Finally, near the Euphrates, as Zenobia tried to escape east toward Persian territory, she was caught. No dramatic final stand. No honorable duel. She was pulled into Roman custody, alive. From that instant, her story no longer belonged to her. It was a Roman asset. Aurelian knew exactly what he possessed. This was the woman who had minted coins with her own face in lands Rome claimed. This was the queen whose armies had marched into Egypt. Killing her quietly would waste an enormous propaganda weapon. Keeping her for a triumph would tell every governor, every general, every foreign monarch. Try to copy her, and you will end up exactly where she ends up. 2 years after her capture, Rome was ready. The empire had survived a storm, invasions, economic collapse, civil war. Aurelian had pushed enemies back, stabilized the borders, and crushed the Palmyrene Empire that had challenged him. He needed a spectacle to cement his image as Rome's savior. The triumph of 274 CE would be that spectacle. People flooded into the city from the countryside. Rumors spread. An Eastern queen would be displayed in chains. The morning of the triumph, Rome transformed into a stage. The air was thick with dust, sweat, and anticipation. Banners hung from buildings. Soldiers lined the route to control the mob. Priests prepared sacrifices. Aurelian dressed in his special triumphal outfit, with a crown and purple cloak. Behind the scenes, prisoners were being arranged, dressed, chained, positioned. Zenobia was not placed at the back of the line. She was placed in the prime position among the captives. Ancient sources describe what she wore. Not rags, not simple clothes. An absurd overload of jewelry. Bracelets, necklaces, gems covering her neck, her arms, her dress. On top of that display, heavy gold chains were locked around her wrists and neck. Not thin chains, thick, weighted bands that dragged her down. They were so massive that attendants had to walk beside her to support some of the weight so she would not collapse completely. Every step was agony. Every step reminded her what had been stolen from her. Rome chose gold instead of iron deliberately. This was not about restraint. This was about mockery. The message was razor sharp. All the wealth she had controlled, all the trade routes her empire had managed, all the riches she once commanded had been melted into shackles. She was transformed into a walking display of stolen luxury. She was not just a prisoner. She was a living billboard for Roman power over the East. The crowd roared as she passed. Some screamed insults. Others just stared. Children watched a queen reduced to an exhausted woman, struggling not to collapse on the stones. Senators observed from decorated platforms, measuring Aurelian's success. Foreign ambassadors from other kingdoms watched and took mental notes. This is what Rome does to rulers who forget their place. This is the cost of rebellion, transformed into live performance. And what was going through Zenobia's mind during those hours? She knew Roman tradition. She knew the end of a triumph could be the end of a life. Other captured leaders had walked this exact path and never walked out again. Vercingetorix of Gaul had resisted Julius Caesar, been paraded in a triumph, then strangled in a prison beneath the Capitoline. Jugurtha of Numidia had marched in chains, then starved in darkness below, while people celebrated above. The pattern was unmistakable. Walk the route, entertain the city, die quietly. The route climbed toward the Capitoline Hill. The noise intensified, then began to fade as the procession reached its final stage. Temples loomed, priests moved forward. Somewhere nearby, the entrance to the underground prison waited. The place where so many defeated enemies had vanished. Zenobia did not know if she would be taken there when the cheering stopped. She did not know if this march was the last thing she would ever see. The chains cut into her skin, the jewelry dug into her shoulders. The sun beat down. The queen who had once dictated terms to provinces now waited for one man, Aurelian, to decide whether she would live in a villa or die in a hole in the rock. And as she reached the point where other rulers had been dragged away to their final darkness, the question hung in the air. Would Rome turn her into another corpse beneath the hill, or into something even more useful than that? 1608. Aurelian made his decision. When the triumph ended and the crowd scattered, Zenobia did not descend into the rock beneath the Capitoline. No rope tightened around her throat. No silent execution in the darkness. Instead, the emperor transformed her into a permanent ornament for his victory. He gave her a house, land near Rome, a controlled existence under constant surveillance. Not freedom, not death, something in between. Ancient writers say she ended up in a villa outside the city, near Tibur, what we now call Tivoli, a place with gardens, servants, fine food, and walls she could not cross without permission. Some sources claim she married a Roman senator. Others say her daughters were married into respectable Roman families. The details are murky, and historians still argue, but the basic picture is clear. She did not return to being a queen. She became an exhibit in Rome's social world. Think about what that actually means. Every time she appeared at a banquet, every time she walked through an Italian garden, she was a reminder. Guests could look at her and think, that woman once ruled from Egypt to Anatolia. Now she lives here because a Roman emperor decided she could. Her survival was not mercy in any pure sense. It was strategy. Aurelian got to display a living symbol of his dominance for years, instead of just one bloody afternoon. Zenobia's story exposes one of Rome's favorite tricks. They did not always kill their enemies. Sometimes they broke them, then dressed the pieces in nice clothes and placed them in gilded cages. For a ruler, this could be worse than a clean execution. You had to live with the knowledge that your status was gone forever, and that your very existence advertised your defeat. But not everyone let Rome write the final chapter like that. Some rulers never made it to a triumph. Some refused to let the empire transform them into trophies, and in one case, Rome pushed its humiliation so far that it ignited a fire it could barely contain. Shift the scene from Syrian deserts to the cold, wet island of Britain. The year is around 60 CE. The emperor on the throne is Nero. In the east, he plays the artist and indulges in luxury. In the west, his officials strip provinces for taxes and profit. One of those provinces is Britain, partly conquered, partly ruled through so-called friendly client kings. One of those kings is Prasutagus of the Iceni. Prasutagus tried to play the Roman game. He accepted their support, kept his local throne, and thought he could secure his family's future by making Rome a partner in his will. He left half his kingdom to Nero and half to his two daughters. It was a desperate gamble at balance. Give the emperor a peace and hope he lets the rest survive. Rome did not care about his clever arrangement. When Prasutagus died, the imperial procurator, Catus Decianus, arrived. A procurator was essentially Rome's financial enforcer. His job was to extract money from provinces and maintain order. He examined the will, examined the lands, and threw the document aside. Roman officials seized everything. They treated Prasutagus' kingdom as if it had always belonged to Rome, and this was simply the moment to collect. Property was confiscated. The local nobility was stripped, beaten, enslaved. Loans that had been generously offered by Roman moneylenders suddenly came due with brutal force. Behind the legal language, it was simple robbery protected by imperial power. And when Prasutagus' widow, Queen Boudica, protested, she received her answer in the most public way imaginable. Tacitus, the Roman historian whose father-in-law served in Britain, recorded what happened next. Roman officers had Boudica flogged in front of her own people. They bound her, raised the whip, and laid into her body. Blow after blow. She was not a criminal on trial. She was the queen of an allied tribe that had fought alongside Rome in the past. That did not stop them. They wanted everyone watching to understand who held real authority now. Here is the crucial difference. A Roman woman of status could cause a scandal by being publicly beaten. Even a man of citizen rank being whipped in the open was a serious matter. For Boudica, there were no such protections. She was outside the circle of Roman citizenship. That made her fair game. Her pain was a message to her people. Your leaders exist at our pleasure. Then they went after her daughters. Two young girls, royal blood, unmarried. Tacitus does not paint a picture. He uses short, hard words and moves on because even he could barely stomach it. The girls were assaulted, not in private, not hidden. It was done in a way that ensured the tribe witnessed it. The goal was not just to hurt them. It was to crush the spirit of the family line, to grind Roman dominance into the deepest wound possible. This was calculated. This was not a few soldiers losing control. This was policy backed by a legal system that recognized no crime in it. Boudica and her daughters had no rights Rome felt obligated to respect. They were instruments in a lesson. Resist. And this is what follows. But the lesson backfired. Instead of producing obedience, it produced rage so intense it nearly tore Roman Britain apart. Boudica did not crawl away and accept her new position. While the whip marks still healed, she began moving from settlement to settlement, calling in allies. Tribes that had been pushed around by Roman governors listened. Warriors who had seen land stripped and friends enslaved started gathering. Many of them had served in Roman auxiliary units and knew how Roman soldiers fought. They also knew something else. If they did nothing, the abuses would never stop. The army Boudica raised was massive. Tens of thousands, maybe over 100,000 if we trust Roman estimates. Men armed with swords, spears, axes, whatever they could find. Women in chariots, elders shouting for revenge. This was not a professional army like a Roman legion. It was a nation with a grudge. Their first target was Camulodunum, a Roman colony sitting on land stolen from local tribes. It had a temple to the deified Emperor Claudius, a stone monument to Roman rule that local people were forced to support with their taxes. Boudicca's forces hit the city hard. They burned buildings, slaughtered the Roman settlers, wiped out the garrison. No negotiated surrender, no mercy. Rome had taught them what mercy looked like. They returned that lesson in full. Next came Londinium, the early version of London. Back then, it was a busy trading town, not yet an official colony, but packed with merchants and Romanized Britons. The governor, Suetonius Paulinus, realized he could not defend it with the troops he had available. He made a cold calculation: evacuate what he could, abandon the city, and save the army for a decisive battle later. Everyone left behind faced Boudicca's fury. Her army poured into Londinium and reduced it to rubble. Buildings burned so hot that archaeologists today can still detect a clear red layer in the ground from the fire. Whoever remained in the town, traders, families, anyone unlucky enough to be there, was killed. Another city, Verulamium, met the same fate. 3 centers of Roman power in Britain obliterated in rapid succession. Tacitus claims around 70,000 Romans and Roman allies died in the uprising. Even if that number is exaggerated, the scale of destruction was enormous. Boudicca had taken the public humiliation Rome inflicted on her and hurled it back in their face. She did not march to Rome in chains. She turned their provinces into graveyards. Eventually, Suetonius Paulinus found ground to fight on his terms. He selected terrain where Roman discipline and armor could overcome raw numbers. Boudicca's warriors formed up in front. Behind them, their families and wagons lined up to watch, blocking any retreat. She rode out and spoke, according to Tacitus, not as a monarch defending a legal claim, but as a woman and a mother answering abuse. She said, in essence, I am here as one person among you, not as a queen begging for her lost throne. I fight like any other person who has been beaten and whose children have been violated. The Romans see us as slaves. Today we show them we are not. The speech, as Tacitus records it, is raw. It centers on the whipping and the crimes against her daughters as the core reason for war. This is Rome's nightmare made real. Private brutality transformed into a public rebellion that threatens their control of an entire region. The battle ended in catastrophe for Boudicca. Roman legions, when they had room to fight properly, were killing machines. Their tight formations, heavy armor, and discipline tore through the packed British lines. When the front collapsed, there was nowhere to run. The wagons behind became a trap. Tacitus describes a slaughter. Men, women, and children cut down as they tried to flee through their own carts. Boudicca witnessed the defeat and understood exactly what came next if she allowed herself to be captured. She knew Roman habits. She knew what happened to royal women who lost. She knew what a triumph looked like, even if she had never set foot in Rome. The ropes, the jeers, the slow march, the chains biting into skin. She refused to be dragged across an ocean and displayed as a beaten curiosity. So she took poison. Tacitus says she ended her own life rather than let Rome decide how her story would close. No Mamertine prison, no golden chains, no slow march through a foreign city. She chose a quick exit over becoming a breathing trophy. Her daughters vanish from the record after the initial abuse. No rescue, no closure. just silence, which may be the darkest line in the whole episode. Look at the contrast. Zenobia endures a triumph and spends the rest of her life in controlled comfort, used as a quiet symbol of Roman victory. Boudica burns cities and refuses to ever be seen in chains, dying on her own terms. Two queens, two different responses to the same